Hi, thanks for tuning in to my channel again. This is David Camper Van Man. In this video I'm going to show you how to do a routine maintenance job, and that's to change the oil and filter on a Volkswagen Transporter T5.1. This is a 2010 model, 140 horsepower. It's actually my brother's van, and I do the maintenance on it, so we'll get cracking with the oil change. Alright, under the bonnet at the front of the engine, this here is the oil filter housing, and that's what I start with. I've warmed the engine up so that the oil is nice and thin to take it out, and I will put my socket in there. It's a 32mm socket and I've got it on extensions, and we just unscrew that there until it's quite loose, and then should be able to spin it off by hand. But before I put my hand down there, I'm going to put some rags in, some blue roll, because there will be some spillages. Now, it's not a disaster if you get some oil spilled, because this one has got a sump tray and we can clean that afterwards if necessary. So I've got my hand down. It's quite tight actually, although I have seen worse. And that is the oil filter housing. And then we will go to the sump next. Okay, next stage for the oil change. You'll notice that I've jacked the vehicle up just for easy access. I've actually run out of axle stands. I've got so many other vehicles on stands just now. So I've jacked the vehicle up for access, and we'll be able to take the sump tray off now. The transporters don't always have sump trays, but this one does. And what we do is we take it off with a 13mm socket, and there are 6 fixings. And it should just drop down and drop forward. And it's a good opportunity to clean that just now. Okay, so now that we've got that off, we can get the sump drain plug off, and that's my oil drainer. Now, okay, so it is a 19mm head on it, and that's the sump there. So just loosen it. And the thing with the sump plug is, always wear gloves, by the way. You can probably see that I've got them on there. So unscrew that, but keep it held in until you can feel the last thread jumping anti-clockwise, and you can see the oil dripping away there. Now just get the oil tray in line, and then whip the sump plug out, and you don't get covered in oil. It's actually not very windy today as well, so sometimes if it's windy and you're doing an oil change outside, the wind will blow the oil everywhere. Now just leave it to dry, to drain, and put the sump plug somewhere that you'll find it. And we just let that drip until it's completely empty. Okay, while the oil is draining from the sump, this is a little safety precaution I take while the oil is out of the engine. Take the key out of the ignition and put it in your pocket, put it somewhere else so nobody can start the engine. But just as a backup, we're putting a sign in front of the steering wheel which says no oil, and that will stop, hopefully prevent anybody inadvertently starting the engine when there's no oil in it. Alright, my brother is always up and down forestry tracks because that's what he does. So we're going to clean the sump protection tray. Okay, now that the oil has drained, that's just dripping very gradually. I'm going to put the sump plug back in, and I've given it a nice clean and made sure that the sealing washer is good. So we just put that in. I sprayed it with brake cleaner to clean all the threads, because you don't want a gritty thread, because if you strip the thread in one of these, it's a big job to deal with. Okay, so that's it in finger tight, and just nip it up with the spanner and just a little more. Don't want to over tighten it. And that is oil all out, and we will go to the oil filter next. Alright, oil filter next. Now this is the old oil filter sitting in the oil filter housing. The new oil filter should come with some extra seals. Now a lot of people don't use these, but I always replace them. And we're going to clean the oil filter housing before we put it back on. And I've got this brake cleaner, and this is just a tub of old rags that I keep together. So if we give that a good clean, it's a bit more work than maybe a lot of people do, but it's always nice to know that things are clean, and important to remember to let the brake cleaner dry, but it dries pretty quick. Right, so there's an oil seal here, just flip it off with that little screwdriver, and they're all different size, so it's pretty obvious which one goes where. Just a wee bit of that off. It's a bit cold today, so they're a little bit tight. And the last one goes in a groove near the end, and it's quite obvious which one it is, because there's two wide grooves, but one of the wide grooves is where the thread for putting the oil filter on ends. And then you just pop on your oil filter, snap it in, and then screw it into the engine bay. Alright, before you put the oil filter housing back on, dip your finger with a little bit of oil and run it over all the new seals. It doesn't need much, it just helps it go on a bit easier. And we're going to pop the oil filter housing back in. As you can see, there's the housing there. A little bit awkward when you've got a camera to accommodate as well, so excuse my hands if you can't see what's going on. And it's pretty difficult to get this cross-threaded, so you should be able to just run it round a couple of threads first and then get your tool onto it. And this is where you don't want to rush things, because if you do get it wrong, you just have to buy a new housing. So just run that round. It does get a little bit stiffer, but it still moves, and you'll know when it stops. Okay, that's it, stop there, and just a touch more. So now I'm going to fill the engine up. It takes, I think it's 7.6 litres of engine oil, and we're using Quantum Long Life 3, that's 530 fully synthetic oil. So there we go, managed to drop some oil, and that's why we've got the rags or blue roll. So my pourer is 2 litres. So I'll have nearly 4 of these. I think the recommended oil change duration is 20,000 miles, which is a lot of miles. I tend to do it a little bit sooner, but that's for you to make your own mind up about. So that's 2. I always just tell myself how much I've put in so that I know I'm not going to underfill it. Right, we're nearly there. We just need to put the sump tray back on. This is the belly pan, whatever you want to call it. I've prepped the bolts with a little bit of copper grease. And this is not a factory standard sump tray. Well, it's a genuine one, but there's a little locator which we don't have. So it can be a little awkward to find the bolt positions. I've copper greased them because, like I say, it's up and down tracks all the time and usually pretty mucky. So the copper grease really helps. And a few threads. And then get my tool. Okay, 6 bolts all on. Okay, so now that we've got all the oil in the engine, we can dip it to make sure it's at the right level. Now I always clean it first to avoid getting a false reading. So the level it should be at no higher than is there, and as you can possibly see, it's just a little bit over that, but we haven't started the engine yet. So we'll start the engine and then let the oil settle to give us our true level. Okay, so we're back in the cab now, and we've still got our no oil sign up, and we know that we've changed the oil, so we can get rid of that for now. And then we're able to start the engine. Now, that red light which just went out there, that was the oil. It was like an oil can. So that goes out when the oil's at the correct level. So we just start the engine to get the oil right around the engine, let it idle for a moment, switch the engine off, and then we can check our oil in a moment or two. Okay, so that's how we change the oil and filter on a Volkswagen Transporter T5.1. Thanks for watching my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my other videos.